Papa, I met this woman in the market today, and she gave me sweet bread and this sketch.
The royal decree arrived at dawn, sealed with blood and silver, demanding the Alpha King surrender his Omega bride to the Pack Council within 3 days, or watch his heir lose all claim to the throne. Marcus Aurelius held the parchment in trembling hands, reading the words that would destroy everything he'd built in the 7 years since he'd sent her away. 7 years since he'd made the choice that had haunted every moment of his rule. 7 years since he'd looked into Lucia's eyes and told her their bond was forbidden, that Pack law was absolute, that her bloodline, tainted by human ancestry 3 generations back, made their union an abomination before the old gods. And now his son had brought home a drawing. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because this story is about to break you in ways you didn't see coming. The drawing sat on Marcus's desk, rendered in charcoal by his 7-year-old son's surprisingly skilled hand. Every curve of her face, every angle of her jaw, the exact tilt of her eyes that had once looked at him with such devotion it had nearly unmade his resolve. Cassius had found her. Somehow, impossibly. His heir had encountered the woman Marcus had banished from the capital, the woman he'd erased from every official record, the woman whose name was forbidden to be spoken within palace walls under penalty of exile. "Father," Cassius had said, bursting into the throne room that morning with the sketch clutched in his small fists, "I met the most beautiful lady in the market yesterday. She gave me sweet bread and told me stories about the old magic. She said I had my father's eyes. Can I invite her to my naming ceremony?" Marcus had felt the blood drain from his face. The naming ceremony. The ritual where Cassius would be formally acknowledged as heir before the entire pack, before the Council of Elders, before every Alpha family that held power in the realm. The ceremony that was now just 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. 3 days to respond to the decree. And somehow, after all these years of silence, the universe had aligned to destroy him. "Where did you meet this woman?" Marcus had demanded, his voice harsher than he'd intended. Cassius had flinched, confusion clouding his young face. "In the lower quarter, father. By the fountain near the temple of Diana. She sells herbs and you will not speak of her again." The words had cut like shattered glass. "You will not return to that quarter. You will forget you ever saw her face." But it was too late. The drawing existed. And the decree on his desk made it clear. Someone on the council knew. Someone had discovered that Lucia was still within the capital's borders, that she hadn't fled to the borderlands as he'd commanded, that she'd stayed despite everything, despite the blood oath he'd forced her to swear, despite the silver chains they'd wrapped around her wrists as they dragged her from the palace, despite the public proclamation that had declared their bond null and void before every witness in the realm. Marcus moved to the window overlooking the capital city of Romulus, the sprawling metropolis that had been his family's seat of power for 12 generations. Smoke rose from 1,000 chimneys. The morning bells of the temple district rang out across red-tiled roofs. Somewhere down there, in the tangle of streets and shadows, Lucia was living a life he'd stolen from her. She'd been so young when they'd met. 22 to his 35. A healer's apprentice who'd come to the palace to treat his sister's fever during the plague summer. He'd scented her the moment she'd walked through the doors, that unmistakable pull of a true mate bond, the kind that occurred perhaps once in 100 years. The kind that legends were written about. The kind that Pack law explicitly forbade if the bloodlines weren't pure. He'd tried to resist. Gods, he'd tried. For 3 months he'd kept his distance while she'd tended to his sister, while she'd moved through the palace halls with quiet grace, while she'd slowly become indispensable to everyone who knew her. But the bond had been merciless. Every night he'd dreamed of her. Every morning he'd woken with her scent in his lungs. And finally, during the autumn festival, when she'd stumbled in the gardens and he'd caught her in his arms, the bond had snapped into place with such force that they'd both gasped. "I feel it," she'd whispered, her dark eyes wide with wonder. "The stories are true. You're my... Don't say it." He'd released her immediately, stepping back as if she'd burned him. "Don't ever say it." But it was too late. The bond was acknowledged. And in his weakness, in his desperate longing for something beyond duty and throne and bloodline, He'd claimed her anyway. For 6 months, they'd hidden their relationship. 6 months of stolen moments and secret meetings. 6 months where Marcus had convinced himself they could find a way to make it work, that he could challenge the old laws, that his position as Alpha King would be enough to protect her. 6 months of the most profound happiness he'd ever known. And then she'd gotten pregnant. The memory still felt like a knife between his ribs. The morning she'd told him, her face glowing with joy and terror in equal measure. "Marcus, I'm carrying your child. Your heir." He'd known in that instant that everything was about to end. Because pack law was clear, an heir with tainted blood could not inherit the throne. And if Marcus claimed Cassius as his legitimate son, if he insisted on honoring the mate bond, the council would have no choice but to invoke the ancient protocols. They would strip him of his title. They would install his younger brother, Julius, as Alpha King. And they would execute Lucia for the crime of bearing a forbidden child. So he'd made the choice that had destroyed them both. He'd claimed the child but denied the bond. He'd told the council that Lucia was a surrogate, nothing more. A desperate lie that had bought him time. And the moment Cassius was born, the moment Marcus had held his perfect son in his arms and felt the overwhelming weight of fatherhood, he'd sent guards to take Lucia away. She'd screamed. Gods, her screams had echoed through the palace like dying music. She'd begged him to remember their bond, to remember the vows they'd spoken in secret under the autumn moon. She'd clawed at the silver chains until her wrists bled. And he'd stood there stone-faced and watched them drag her away. The blood oath had been his final cruelty. The council's requirement that she swear never to reveal the true nature of their relationship, never to claim Cassius as hers, never to speak Marcus's name with anything but formal respect. The silver chains had burned the oath into her skin, leaving scars that would never heal. And then they'd cast her out of the palace with nothing but the clothes on her back and a purse of gold that felt like payment for murder. He'd told himself it was mercy, that letting her live was more than most alphas would have done, that she would forget him, move on, find some small happiness in whatever life she built beyond the palace walls. But she'd stayed. She'd stayed in Romulus, living in the shadows of the city he ruled, close enough that the bond between them was a constant ache in his chest. For 7 years, he'd felt her presence like a ghost at the edge of his consciousness. For 7 years, he'd known exactly where she was, because the mate bond, even denied, even betrayed, never truly severed. And now his son had found her. Had drawn her face with the innocent skill of a child who didn't understand he was sketching his own mother. A knock at the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Enter," Marcus called, his voice rough. The door opened to reveal Decimus, his chief advisor and oldest friend. The older man's face was grave as he crossed the room, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. "You've seen the decree," Decimus said. It wasn't a question. "Who sent it?" Marcus demanded. "Who on the council knows?" "Senator Quintus." Decimus's expression was grim. "He's been investigating rumors for months. Apparently, one of his informants saw Cassius in the lower quarter yesterday. Saw him talking to a woman who matches the description of her." Marcus felt rage and fear war in his chest. Quintus. Of course it was Quintus. The senator had been his most vocal opponent when Marcus had first claimed the throne. Had argued that Marcus was too young, too impulsive, too willing to bend tradition. And now Quintus had found the weapon that could finally bring him down. "What does he want?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Officially, he wants you to produce the Omega and prove that the blood oath is still in effect. That she's maintained silence. That there's been no contact between her and the heir." Decimus paused, his jaw tight. "Unofficially, he wants you to kill her. Publicly. To prove your loyalty to pack law above all else." The world tilted. "No. Marcus. I said no." The alpha power in his voice made the windows rattle. "I will not kill her. I will not." He broke off, unable to finish the sentence. unable to articulate the howling void that opened in his chest at the thought of Lucia's death. Decimus studied him with knowing eyes. The bond is still active, isn't it? Even after all these years. Even after everything you did to sever it. Marcus said nothing, which was answer enough. Then you're in even more danger than I thought, Decimus said quietly. Because if Quintus can prove the bond never broke, he can argue that Cassius is legitimate. Which means the boy is a threat to everyone who wants Julius on the throne instead. Ice flooded Marcus's veins. He'd been so focused on protecting Cassius's claim to the throne that he hadn't considered the opposite problem. If Cassius was legitimate, if Lucia could be proven to be his true mate, then his son became a target. Every Alpha family that had backed Julius as the proper heir, every council member who believed in bloodline purity above all else, would see Cassius as an abomination that needed to be eliminated. How many are with Quintus on this? Marcus asked. At least 6 of the 12 council members. Maybe more. Decimus moved to the window, his shoulders tense. You don't have the votes to overrule them, Marcus. If they call for a formal tribunal, if they demand proof of the blood oath's integrity, you'll have no choice but to produce her. And once she's before the council, they'll find a way to make her talk. Silver. Torture. They'll break the oath by force if they have to. She won't break, Marcus said, the words torn from somewhere deep. I know her. She'd die before she'd put Cassius at risk. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Decimus replied. The 2 men stood in silence, the weight of 7 years of lies pressing down on them like a physical force. Outside, the city continued its morning rhythms, unaware that their king was standing on the edge of complete collapse. Finally Marcus spoke. I need to see her. That's insane. If anyone follows you, if Quintus gets even a hint that you're making contact. I don't care. Marcus's voice was steel. My son found her. He drew her face. That means the bond recognized her even without him knowing who she was. That means fate is pushing us back together whether we want it or not. He turned to face Decimus fully. And I need to know if she'll fight this. Or if she'll let them destroy her to protect Cassius. Decimus's expression softened. You already know the answer to that, old friend. She's an Omega who bore your child. She'll sacrifice everything. Then I need to convince her not to. Marcus moved toward the door, his decision made. Because I'm not letting her die. Not for me. Not for the throne. Not for anything. And if that means losing your crown. Decimus called after him. Marcus paused in the doorway, his hand on the frame. For 7 years, he'd chosen duty over love. He'd chosen the throne over his mate. He'd chosen to be a king instead of a man. But now his son had drawn her face. And the universe was demanding an answer to a question Marcus had been avoiding for far too long. What was he truly willing to sacrifice? Then I lose my crown, he said quietly and walked out. The lower quarter of Romulus was a labyrinth of narrow streets and ancient buildings, where the smell of herbs and cooking fires mixed with the ever-present scent of the river. Marcus moved through the crowds in a simple cloak, his face hidden, his alpha presence dampened to nothing. He'd done this before, in those first terrible months after sending Lucia away. He'd haunted these streets like a ghost, watching her from a distance, making sure she was safe, hating himself more with every passing day. He'd seen her build a life, watched her open a small shop selling healing herbs and tinctures, seen her smile at customers with a warmth that never quite reached her eyes, observed the way she'd touch her left wrist sometimes, fingers tracing the silver scars of the blood oath, as if reminding herself of all she'd lost. And he'd stayed away. Because seeing her was agony, and because he'd convinced himself that his absence was the kindest thing he could offer. But now everything had changed. The shop was tucked between a baker and a candlemaker, a modest space with bundles of dried herbs hanging in the window. The sign above the door read Lucia's Remedies, in simple script. She'd kept her name. Somehow that detail made his chest ache. Marcus waited until the current customer left before pushing open the door. A small bell chimed. The scent of lavender and sage washed over him, and beneath it, unmistakable and overwhelming, was her scent. 7 years hadn't diminished it. If anything, it hit him harder now, the mate bond roaring to life with a ferocity that nearly drove him to his knees. She emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron, a polite greeting already forming on her lips. Then she saw him. Her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the small shop, two people who'd been ripped apart by duty and law and impossible choices. It changed. Her dark hair, once long enough to reach her waist, was now cut to her shoulders. There were lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was thinner, sharper, like she'd been honed down to pure survival. But her eyes, those dark, expressive eyes that had once looked at him with such love, were exactly the same, except now they were filled with fear. "Get out," she whispered. Her hand moved to her left wrist, covering the scars. "You can't be here." "The oath." "I know about the oath." Marcus stepped further into the shop, letting the door close behind him. "I need to talk to you, Lucia. Something's happened." "I don't care what's happened." Her voice was shaking now, but there was steel beneath it. "You made your choice 7 years ago. You chose your throne. You chose to throw me away like I was nothing. So whatever crisis has brought you to my door, whatever you need from me now, the answer is no." The words hit like physical blows. "Lucia, don't." She held up a hand, and he saw it was trembling. "Don't say my name like that. Don't use that voice. You lost the right to either the moment you put those chains on me." Shame and guilt crashed through him. "I was trying to protect you. By destroying me." Her laugh was bitter. "By forcing me to swear an oath that burned into my skin. By taking my child and raising him to believe I don't exist." Her voice broke on the last word. "Every day for 7 years I've lived in this city, watching your banners fly above the palace. Every day I've walked these streets knowing my son is up there, and I can't go to him. I can't tell him who I am. I can't even speak your name without the oath trying to kill me." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing her left wrist. The scars from the silver chains were still there, raised and angry, but there was something else now. Black veins spreading from the scars like poison, crawling up her forearm. "This is what happens when you fight a blood oath," she said flatly. "Every time I want to scream the truth, every time I want to run to the palace and claim my son, the magic pushes back. It's been killing me slowly for 7 years. So forgive me if I don't want to hear whatever excuse you've come here to offer." Horror filled Marcus's throat. "I didn't know. The oath wasn't supposed to." "Wasn't supposed to what?" "Hurt. Destroy. It's blood magic, Marcus. It's ancient and cruel and absolute. Exactly like the pack laws you chose over me." She lowered her sleeve, her expression hardening. "Now get out of my shop before someone sees you. The last thing I need is to be executed for having contact with the Alpha King." "Cassius drew your face," Marcus said, the words tumbling out in desperation. "He met you yesterday. In the market. And he came home and drew you, Lucia. Every detail perfect. And now the council knows. They've issued a decree demanding I produce you, demanding proof of the blood oath's integrity. They're going to call a tribunal." The color that had returned to her face vanished again. "No. Senator Quintus is leading the charge. He has votes. Enough to force my hand." Marcus took a step closer, his hands raised in supplication. "They're going to summon you before the council. And if they do, if they start questioning you under silver, I'll die before I tell them anything that could hurt Cassius." Her voice was absolute. "I know. That's why I'm here." He was close enough now to see the pulse jumping in her throat, to feel the mate bond straining between them like a physical cord. "I need you to run. Tonight. I'll give you money, papers, everything you need to disappear into the borderlands. But you have to leave Romulus before the decree takes effect." She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Run." Yes. Leave the only place where I can occasionally see my son from a distance. Leave the city where I've built the only life I have left. Run away so you can stay comfortable on your throne. Her eyes were blazing now. Did it ever occur to you that I've already been running for 7 years? That every day I wake up and choose to survive in the shadow of the palace is its own kind of exile? Please. The word came out broken. I can't watch them kill you, Lucia. I can't. His voice failed. You think I've been comfortable? You think I haven't regretted every moment of the last 7 years? Every night I lie awake knowing you're down here, alone, suffering because of choices I made. Every morning I wake up and see Cassius's face and see you in every expression. Do you have any idea what that's like? No, she said coldly. I don't. Because you made sure I'd never get to know our son. You made sure I'd never wake up to his face or hear his voice or watch him grow. You stole that from me. So don't you dare stand here and act like you've suffered even a fraction of what I have. The truth of it silenced him. 'Cause she was right. Whatever pain he'd endured was nothing compared to what he'd inflicted on her. I'm sorry, he said finally, the words pathetically inadequate. I'm so sorry, Lucia. For all of it. For not being strong enough to fight the council. For choosing duty over you. For letting them put those chains on you. For every moment of these 7 years. He met her eyes, letting her see the full weight of his regret. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I'm begging you, please run. Please let me save your life, even if I destroyed everything else. For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly. He has your eyes. Marcus's breath caught. What? Cassius. When he came to my stall yesterday. A tear slid down her cheek. He has your eyes. And your smile. And the way you used to tilt your head when you were curious about something. Her voice was breaking apart. He was so sweet, Marcus. So open and kind. He told me about the naming ceremony. Asked if I'd come. And I wanted to tell him. Gods, I wanted to tell him so badly. But the oath. She touched her wrist again. The oath started burning the moment I thought about saying the words. He doesn't know, Marcus said, his own throat tight. I've never told him about you. I couldn't figure out how to explain any of this. So he thinks he has no mother at all. He thinks you died in childbirth. It was the kindest lie I could manage. Lucia flinched as if he'd struck her. Kindest? You told my son I'm dead, and you call that kindness. What was I supposed to tell him? The words came out harsher than intended, driven by years of impossible guilt. That I ripped you away from him because the council demanded it. That I chose my crown over his mother. That every law and tradition we have says he shouldn't exist. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and grief warring in his chest. I couldn't tell him the truth without making him hate everything he's supposed to inherit. Without making him question his own right to exist. So instead you erased me. Her voice was hollow. Made me a ghost story. A tragic footnote in his birth records. I was trying to protect him from questions I couldn't answer. Marcus's control was fraying. Every day someone asks why the heir has no mother. Every day I have to smile and deflect and pretend the emptiness in our family is normal. Do you think I don't see the way other children look at him when they talk about their mothers? Do you think I don't watch him draw pictures of what he imagines you looked like? He stopped, realization dawning. That's why the drawing was so accurate. He's been imagining you for years. And when he finally met you, the bond recognized what his mind had already created. Lucia's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. He draws me. Constantly. I have dozens of sketches hidden in my study. He creates different versions of you. Different hair colors, different faces. But yesterday's drawing, that was exact. Every detail. Because his soul knew you even if his mind didn't. The weight of that truth settled between them like fresh snow. The bond between mother and child, powerful enough to transcend memory and separation and even death. I met him at the fountain, Lucia said softly, her eyes distant with memory. He was watching the water and he looked so sad. So I sat down next to him and asked if he was all right. And he said. She swallowed hard. He said he was thinking about his mother, about what she might have been like. And I nearly broke right there, Marcus. Nearly shattered the oath and the council and everything just to tell him I was right there beside him. But you didn't, Marcus said, understanding the enormity of her restraint. No, because the oath reminded me what would happen if I did. The black veins would spread to my heart. I'd die in front of him. And he'd never understand why. She looked down at her scarred wrist. So instead I gave him sweet bread and told him stories about the old magic. And I let him talk about his father, about you. And pretended I didn't feel like my chest was caving in with every word. What did he say about me? The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it. Lucia's expression softened, just slightly. He said you're the strongest person he knows. That you work too hard and forget to sleep. That you always keep your promises. Her eyes met his. That he wants to be just like you when he grows up. The words hit harder than any blade could have. Because Marcus knew exactly what it meant to have a son who idolized him, and to know he didn't deserve that idolatry. He shouldn't want to be like me, Marcus said roughly. I've made nothing but mistakes. He's 7 years old. He sees his father as a hero. That's normal. Lucia moved behind the counter, putting physical distance between them as if proximity was too painful to bear. And it's not his fault that his hero made choices that destroyed lives. I destroyed our lives, Lucia. Not anyone else's. Cassius is. Cassius is everything. She cut him off with sudden ferocity. Don't you dare suggest otherwise. That child is the only reason I'm still breathing. The only reason I didn't walk into the river 7 years ago and let the current take me. Her hands gripped the counter edge. So yes, you destroyed our lives. You destroyed us. But you gave me him even if I can only love him from a distance. Even if I can never touch him or hold him or hear him call me mother. He exists. And that means something survived what you did to us. The raw honesty of it left Marcus speechless. He'd spent 7 years assuming Lucia hated him, and she did. But beneath the hate was something more complicated. Love for their son. A fierce, unbreakable devotion that had kept her alive through the worst thing Marcus could have done to her. If you won't run, Marcus said carefully, then I need another solution. Because in 3 days, Quintus will force my hand. He'll demand I bring you before the council. And if I refuse, he'll use that as evidence of my unfitness to rule. Let him, Lucia said. Let him take your crown. You don't deserve it anyway. It's not about what I deserve. Frustration bled into his voice. It's about what happens to Cassius if Julius takes the throne. My brother doesn't believe in mercy or bonds or anything beyond bloodline purity. If he becomes Alpha King, one of his first acts will be to strip Cassius of his inheritance. And the only way to do that legally is to prove the boy's blood is tainted. Lucia's face went pale. He'd investigate. He'd dig until he found the truth. And then he'd have grounds to execute both you and Cassius for the crime of forbidden bloodline mingling. Marcus moved closer to the counter, urgency making his words sharp. That's what's at stake here. Not my crown. Not my reputation. Our son's life. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lucia's hand had moved back to her scarred wrist, her fingers worrying the silver marks like a prayer. What do you want from me? She asked finally. You say you won't let them kill me. You say running isn't an option because Julius would still hunt us down. So what's left? What solution exists that doesn't end with all of us destroyed? Marcus took a breath, steadying himself for what came next. I challenge the pack laws. Publicly. I argue before the council that the prohibition against mixed bloodlines is outdated and cruel. I claim you as my true mate and Cassius as my legitimate heir. He held her gaze. And I stake my throne on the outcome. Lucia stared at him like he'd lost his mind. That's suicide. Maybe. But it's the only way forward that doesn't involve your death or Cassius's disinheritance. Marcus's voice was steady now, certain. The pack laws can be challenged. It's rare, but it's allowed. If I formally contest them before the full council and the assembled alphas, I can force a vote. If I win, the laws change. You and Cassius are protected. If I lose, he trailed off, the implications clear. If you lose, you're stripped of your title and likely executed for blasphemy against pack tradition, Lucia finished. And Julius becomes king anyway. And Cassius loses everything. Not everything. If I lose, I'll have already arranged for you and Cassius to be smuggled out of the capital. False papers, new identities. Enough money to start over somewhere far from here. Marcus's jaw was tight. He'll lose his inheritance, yes. But he'll have his mother. And he'll be alive. You've really thought this through, Lucia said, something like wonder creeping into her voice. I've had 7 years to think about how to fix what I broke. This is the only solution I've found that doesn't involve watching you die. His voice dropped. And I meant what I said, Lucia. I'm not watching you die. Not for my crown. Not for anything. For the first time since he'd walked into her shop, Lucia's expression cracked. Real emotion, grief and longing and terrible, fragile hope, flooded her features. Why now? She whispered. Why are you willing to risk everything now, when you wouldn't 7 years ago? The question hung between them like a blade. And Marcus knew that his answer would determine everything that followed. Because 7 years ago, I was a coward, he said simply. I told myself I was protecting you by pushing you away. That I was protecting Cassius by denying our bond. That I was protecting the realm by upholding tradition. He shook his head. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From the hard choice. From the fight. From the possibility that I might lose everything trying to do the right thing. And now, her voice was barely audible. Now I've already lost everything that matters. Marcus moved around the counter, closing the distance between them. I lost you. I lost the chance to raise my son with his mother. I lost 7 years of happiness because I was too afraid to fight. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I won't make that mistake again, even if it costs me the throne, even if it costs me my life. I'll fight the council and the laws, and every alpha in the realm if that's what it takes to keep you safe. Tears were streaming down Lucia's face now. You're 7 years too late, Marcus. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he gently took her scarred wrist in his hands. Let me try. Let me challenge the laws and fight for the family we should have had. Let me be the man I should have been 7 years ago. Lucia looked down at his hands, cradling her ruined wrist. What if we lose? What if you stake everything and the council votes against us anyway? Then we run. All 3 of us. We disappear into the borderlands and build a life somewhere far from all of this. His thumb traced the silver scars carefully, tenderly. We'll be poor. We'll be nobody. But we'll be together. And Cassius will have both his parents. He'll hate you for taking his inheritance. Maybe. But he'll be alive to hate me. And eventually, maybe he'll understand that some things are worth more than a crown. The shop was silent except for the distant sounds of the market outside. Lucia stood there, tears on her face, her wrist cradled in Marcus's hands, the weight of 7 years and an impossible decision bearing down on her shoulders. I hate you, she said softly. I hate you so much for what you did to us. I know. But I never stopped loving you. The bond never broke, no matter how much I wanted it to. Her voice cracked. And I'm so tired, Marcus. I'm so tired of being alone. Of watching our son from a distance. Of living half a life. Then let me end this, Marcus said. Let me fight for us. Even if it's 7 years too late. Even if you never forgive me. Let me try to make this right. Lucia closed her eyes. For a long moment she stood there, perfectly still, as if listening to some internal voice Marcus couldn't hear. Then, slowly, she turned her hand over in his grip and laced their fingers together. 3 days, she said. You have 3 days to figure out how to challenge pack laws that have stood for 1,000 years. 3 days to convince the council that I'm worthy of being queen. 3 days to undo all the damage we've done. I'll do it in 2, Marcus promised, and despite everything, despite the impossibility of what lay ahead, Lucia almost smiled. Almost. Don't make promises you can't keep, Alpha King, she said, pulling her hand back. You've broken enough of those already. The words stung, but Marcus accepted them. 'Cause she was right. And because if they were going to survive what came next, they needed to face every truth between them, no matter how painful. I'll send word when I have a plan, Marcus said, stepping back toward the door. Don't leave the city. Don't do anything that might draw attention. And Lucia. He paused, one hand on the doorframe. If Cassius comes back to your stall, don't push him away. Let him talk to you. Let him have whatever small comfort your presence can offer. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. That's cruel. I know. But I think he needs you, even if he doesn't understand why. And I think these might be our last days of peace before everything falls apart. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. So let him have a mother, even if he doesn't know that's what you are. Please. Lucia nodded, unable to speak. And Marcus left before his own resolve could break, before he could do something foolish like pull her into his arms and damn the consequences. Outside, the market was in full swing. The scent of bread and fish and humanity washed over him. Marcus pulled his cloak tighter and disappeared into the crowd, his mind already racing with plans and schemes and desperate gambles. 3 days to challenge 1,000 years of tradition. 3 days to save everything he'd destroyed. The War Council convened at midnight in the palace's oldest chamber, a room carved from stone during the founding of Romulus itself. Marcus sat at the head of the ancient table, surrounded by the few people he could trust with the truth. Decimus was there, of course. And beside him sat Octavia, Marcus's sister, the one Lucia had healed during the plague summer, the one who'd watched their love story unfold and wept when it ended. You're insane, Octavia said flatly once Marcus had finished explaining his plan. Challenging pack law. Claiming an Omega with human blood as your mate before the full council. They'll tear you apart. They might, Marcus agreed. But what's the alternative? Let Quintus execute her. Let Julius take the throne and hunt down Cassius. I'm out of options, Octavia. His sister's expression was torn between fury and grief. You had options 7 years ago. You could have fought then when you had more allies, when the council wasn't actively looking for reasons to destroy you. But you chose the easy path. And now you want to take the impossible one. I chose wrong 7 years ago, Marcus said, his voice hard. I won't make that mistake twice. Decimus leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the table. If you're serious about this, we need to understand what we're facing. The pack laws regarding bloodline purity aren't just tradition, they're bound in ancient magic. The same magic that powers the blood oath. To challenge them, you'll need more than passionate speeches. You'll need precedent, legal grounds, something that gives the council a reason to even consider your petition. There is precedent, came a new voice from the doorway. They all turned to see a hooded figure entering the chamber. When she lowered her hood, Octavia gasped. It was Livia, the oldest living member of the royal family. Marcus's great-aunt, a woman who'd supposedly retired from court life decades ago. Aunt Livia, Marcus said, rising. I didn't send for you. No, but word travels fast in this palace. And when I heard you were planning to do something monumentally stupid, I decided to intervene. She moved to the table with surprising grace for someone over 90. Sit down, boy. And listen to someone who actually remembers our history. Marcus sat. Everyone else remained frozen, staring at the old woman who'd been a ghost in the palace for as long as most of them could remember. The pack laws you're so desperate to challenge, Livia began, settling into a chair, weren't always absolute. In the first century after the founding of Romulus, there was a period of about 50 years where bloodline restrictions were significantly looser. Several alpha kings took human-blooded mates. Their children inherited without issue. Hope flared in Marcus's chest. Then there is precedent. Let me finish. Livia's tone was sharp. Those 50 years ended with the purge. A faction of purist alphas, horrified by what they saw as the dilution of our bloodlines, staged a coup. They killed every mixed-blood heir, executed every human-blooded mate. And then they codified the restrictions into law, backing them with blood magic so powerful that even speaking against them became dangerous. She fixed Marcus with a piercing stare. That's what you're up against. Not just tradition, not just politics, ancient magic designed specifically to prevent exactly what you're trying to do. The room fell silent. Even Decimus looked shaken. You're telling me it's impossible, Marcus said. I'm telling you it's nearly impossible. But not quite. Livia pulled a worn leather journal from her robes. During those 50 years of freedom, there were legal documents, marriage contracts, inheritance decrees. All of them were supposed to be destroyed during the purge, but some survived. Hidden away by those who believed the purists had gone too far. She placed the journal on the table. I've spent my entire life collecting them, preserving them, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to use them. Marcus reached for the journal with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of documents, yellowed with age but still legible. Marriage certificates between alphas and omegas with mixed blood. Royal decrees acknowledging children of those unions as legitimate heirs. Legal arguments defending the practice. This is incredible, Decimus breathed, leaning over to read. These documents prove that pack law wasn't always this restrictive, that it can be changed. More than that, Livia said. They prove that the current restrictions weren't handed down by the gods or written into our nature. They were created by frightened men who wanted to control who held power. Which means they can be unmade by braver men who want something better. Octavia was reading over Marcus's shoulder, her expression shifting from skepticism to cautious hope. If you present these to the council, if you can argue that the purest laws were an aberration rather than the natural order, you might actually have a case. It won't be easy, Livia cautioned. Half the council will dismiss these documents as forgeries or irrelevant ancient history. The purist faction will argue that the purge happened for good reason, that those 50 years nearly destroyed our bloodlines. And they'll have the weight of 1,000 years of tradition on their side. But it gives us a foothold, Marcus said, his mind racing. A legal basis for challenge, combined with the argument that forcing omegas into blood oaths is cruel and unnecessary. He looked up at his great-aunt. Why didn't you bring this forward before? Why wait until now? Livia's expression was sad. Because I'm old, Marcus. And I'm tired. And I've watched too many people I loved suffer under these laws to believe change was possible. She reached across the table and placed her gnarled hand over his. But then I heard what you're planning to do. Heard that you're willing to risk your throne for an omega the council threw away. And I thought, maybe this time it will be different. I won't fail her again, Marcus said fiercely. I can't. Then you'll need more than documents and pretty words. Livia withdrew her hand. You'll need allies. Other alphas who've been hurt by these laws. Families who've lost children or mates to bloodline restrictions. There are more of them than you think. People who've stayed silent out of fear but who might be willing to speak up if someone leads the way. Decimus was already making notes. I can reach out quietly. Feel out support. There are at least 3 council members who've lost family members to the restrictions. If we can convince them that change is possible without divine retribution. And we'll need to control the narrative, Octavia added, her strategic mind engaging. If Quintus gets to frame this as the Alpha King throwing away pack tradition for an Omega, you lose before you even begin. But if we frame it as the Alpha King fighting to restore the true laws of our ancestors, challenging the aberration of the purge. She nodded slowly. That's a fight you might win. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Genuine hope. It was fragile, tenuous, built on ancient documents and desperate gambits. But it was real. How long do we have? Tavia asked. The decree gives me 3 days to produce Lucia before the council, Marcus said. But I'm not waiting that long. Tomorrow I'm calling an emergency session. I'll present the challenge formally, with these documents as evidence. Force their hand before Quintus can consolidate more support. Bold, Livia said with approval. And risky. You'll catch them off guard, which is good. But you'll also give them less time to be persuaded to your side. I don't have time for slow persuasion. And neither does Lucia. Marcus closed the journal carefully. Every day she spends under that blood oath, the magic eats away at her. I saw the black veins on her wrist. If we wait too long, there won't be anything left to save. The room fell quiet again, the weight of what Marcus was describing settling over them all. There's something else you need to know, Octavia said quietly. About Julius. Marcus's jaw tightened. What about him? He's been in talks with Quintus. Secret meetings late at night. I have sources who've seen them together. Octavia's expression was grim. Your brother isn't just waiting for you to fail, Marcus. He's actively working to make it happen. And if your challenge to Pack Law fails, Julius will be perfectly positioned to take the throne. With Quintus's full support. Betrayal, sharp and cold, lanced through Marcus's chest. Julius was his brother. They'd grown up together, trained together, shared the burden of royal expectation together. And now Julius was plotting his downfall. Does he know about Lucia? Marcus asked. About the true nature of the bond? I don't think so. Not yet. But if Quintus figures it out. Octavia didn't need to finish the sentence. Then we move faster than they can react, Marcus decided. Tomorrow I call the emergency session. I present the challenge. And I dare Quintus to prove that our ancestors' laws were wrong. He stood addressing them all. I know what I'm asking of you. If this goes badly, anyone associated with me will face consequences. So I'm giving you all the chance to walk away now. No judgment. No blame. None of them moved. We've come too far to turn back now, Decimus said. Besides, Octavia added with a fierce smile, someone needs to make sure you don't completely destroy the family name. Might as well be us. Even Livia nodded. I've been waiting 80 years for someone to challenge these laws. I'm not missing this. Marcus felt emotion thick in his throat. These people, his family, his friends, were willing to risk everything alongside him. For an Omega most of them barely knew. For a principle that could cost them all dearly. Then we have work to do, he said. Decimus, start reaching out to potential allies. Quietly. We need to know who might vote with us before the session begins. Octavia, I need you to gather intelligence on Quintus. Find out exactly how many council members he controls and what leverage he's using. Livia. He turned to his great-aunt. Can you verify the authenticity of these documents? Make sure they'll stand up to scrutiny. Already done, boy. I've had decades to verify them. She stood, preparing to leave. But there's one more thing. The blood oath on Lucia, it needs to be addressed. Even if you win your challenge, even if you change the laws, that oath will still be killing her. And blood magic is nearly impossible to break. Marcus's brief moment of hope dimmed. What are you saying? I'm saying that winning the legal battle isn't enough. You'll also need to find a way to dissolve the oath before it destroys her completely. Livia moved toward the door. And that's going to require magic more powerful than what bound it in the first place. Old magic. The kind that hasn't been practiced in Romulus for generations. Where do we find that kind of magic? Tavia asked. Livia paused in the doorway, her expression troubled. The Temple of Diana. The high priestess there is one of the last practitioners of the old ways. If anyone can break a blood oath, it's her. But she doesn't involve herself in political matters. And she certainly doesn't help alpha kings who've made a habit of enforcing the very laws you're now trying to break. I'll convince her, Marcus said. Whatever it takes. Then you'd better be very convincing. Because Priestess Valeria doesn't suffer fools, and she has a long memory. Livia disappeared into the corridor, her final words echoing behind her. Good luck tomorrow, Marcus. You're going to need it. The Temple of Diana stood at the edge of the lower quarter, a massive structure of white marble and ancient stone that predated the palace by centuries. Marcus approached it in the gray hour before dawn, still wearing his simple cloak, still moving like a shadow through empty streets. He'd left the palace through a hidden passage, trusting no one but Decimus to know where he'd gone. The temple was silent. No priestesses moved through the columned walkway. No supplicants knelt at the altar. Just Marcus and the looming presence of the goddess's statue. Diana the huntress, bow drawn, forever frozen in the moment before release. You come seeking the old magic, a voice said from behind him. Marcus spun to find a woman standing in a doorway. He could have sworn was empty moments before. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair bound in intricate braids and eyes that seemed to see straight through him. The Alpha King who breaks blood oaths now wishes to unmake one. Priestess Valeria, Marcus said, bowing. I save your courtesies. I know why you're here. The Omega with the poisoned wrist. The mate you threw away like trash. The blood oath you watched them burn into her skin. Valeria's voice was cold as winter. You want me to fix what you allowed to be broken? Shame flooded Marcus's face. Yes. Why should I? The priestess moved forward, her robes whispering against stone. You stood by while they chained her. While they forced her to swear against her own heart. While they marked her with silver and sent her into exile. You did nothing. And now, 7 years later, you come to me expecting salvation. I'm not expecting anything, Marcus said quietly. I'm begging. Not for myself. For her. She's dying, priestess. The oath is killing her slowly. And I'm the reason she's suffering. So I'll do whatever you ask, pay whatever price you demand if you'll just help her. Valeria studied him with those penetrating eyes. The goddess Diana protects those who are hunted. Those who are cast aside by society's rules. Your Omega, Lucia, has prayed here every week for 7 years. She lights candles at the altar. She asks for strength to endure. She never asks to be saved, only to survive long enough to see her son grow. The priestess's expression softened slightly. She is devoted, humble, worthy of the goddess's mercy. And I'm not, Marcus finished. You weren't. But perhaps. Valeria circled him slowly, as if examining a puzzle. Perhaps you're beginning to be. It takes strength to challenge 1,000-year-old laws. It takes courage to risk your throne for someone you've already lost. And it takes humility to come here to me, knowing I have every reason to turn you away. She stopped in front of him. So I won't turn you away. But neither will I make this easy. What do you need from me? Marcus asked. Blood oaths are sealed with the victim's pain. To break one, you need equivalent sacrifice from the one who allowed it to be made. Valeria's voice was matter-of-fact, but her words chilled him. The same silver that burned Lucia's wrists must burn yours. The same words she was forced to swear must be unsworn by you. And the magic that will break the bond will extract its price in suffering. Marcus didn't hesitate. When? After your council session. After you've made your formal challenge to the laws. Valeria turned toward the altar. If you survive the political battle, come back here with Lucia. Together you'll undergo the ritual. And together you'll either break the oath or die trying. Die! Marcus's voice was sharp. Blood magic doesn't release easily, Alpha King. Fights. It hungers. And it will try to consume both of you rather than let itself be undone. Valeria's expression was grave. I can guide the ritual. I can invoke the goddess's protection, but I cannot guarantee your survival. That depends on the strength of your bond, whether there's enough love left between you to overcome 7 years of betrayal. The words hung in the temple air like smoke. Marcus thought of Lucia's face in her shop, the mix of love and hate warring in her eyes. He thought of the way she'd let him hold her scarred wrist, even as she'd told him she'd never forgive him. He thought of the mate bond that had never truly severed, no matter how hard he'd tried to kill it. There's enough, he said, believing it with everything he had. There has to be. We'll see, Valeria said. Now go. Prepare for your council session. Make your challenge. Win your political war. And if you survive. She met his eyes one final time. Come back to me, and we'll wage the magical one. Marcus left the temple as dawn broke over Romulus, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the city, Lucia was waking up in her small room above the shop. Somewhere in the palace, Cassius was beginning his morning lessons, unaware that his entire world was about to shift. And somewhere in the council chambers, Quintus was preparing to destroy everything Marcus loved. But Marcus had a plan now. Ancient documents, legal precedent, a priestess willing to break blood magic. And most importantly, he had the determination to see this through, no matter the cost. 3 days had become 1 day. One chance to make everything right. Or lose everything trying. The emergency council session convened at noon in the Grand Chamber, a vast circular room where the 12 council members sat in raised seats surrounding the Alpha King's platform. Every seat was filled. Every face was grave. Word had spread that something significant was about to happen, and the gallery above was packed with witnesses. Noble families, pack leaders, even common citizens who'd managed to secure entry. Marcus stood on the central platform, Livia's journal clutched in his hands. To his left, Decimus stood as counsel. To his right, surprisingly, stood Octavia, a princess of the royal blood, lending her presence to support her brother's cause. Senator Quintus sat directly opposite Marcus in the council seats, his expression smug and confident. Julius sat in the gallery, watching with hooded eyes. This emergency session is unprecedented, began Praetor Felix, the council's eldest member and nominal leader. Alpha King Marcus has requested an immediate hearing. The floor is yours, your majesty. Marcus took a breath, feeling the weight of 1,000 years of history pressing down on him. Everything hinged on the next hour. Everything. Honored council members, he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. I come before you to challenge pack law. Specifically, the restrictions on bloodline purity that have governed our people for the past millennium. The chamber erupted. Shouts of outrage. Gasps of shock. Quintus was on his feet immediately. This is heresy, the senator roared. Pack law is absolute, handed down by our ancestors and bound in blood magic. It cannot be challenged. It can, Marcus countered, raising his voice over the chaos. And it has been. Multiple times throughout our history. He opened Livia's journal. I hold in my hands documents from the 1st century after Romulus's founding. Marriage contracts between alphas and omegas of mixed blood. Royal decrees acknowledging their children as legitimate heirs. Legal precedents that prove our current restrictions are not ancient divine law, but rather the product of a violent coup known as the Purge. The chamber fell silent. Every eye was fixed on the journal. Forgeries, Quintus spat. Ancient lies meant to undermine pack stability. Not forgeries, Livia said, rising from her seat in the gallery. Every head turned toward her. I am Livia Aurelia, eldest living member of the royal line. I have spent my entire life researching our true history. Not the sanitized version taught to pups, but the real, complicated truth of how we came to be. She moved down to stand beside Marcus. These documents are authentic. I verified their age, their authorship, their legitimacy. They prove that for 50 years our ancestors lived under different laws. Laws that allowed love and bonds to matter more than bloodline percentages. And those 50 years ended in chaos. Another council member, Senator Titus, stood. Mixed bloodlines weakened our pack, made us vulnerable. The purge was necessary to restore order. The purge was genocide, Marcus shot back. It was frightened men killing innocents because they were different, because they challenged the established power structure. And then those same men codified their fear into law and told everyone it was divine will. He held up the journal. But this proves they were lying. That our ancestors knew better. That there was a time when we were braver, kinder, more willing to see omegas as people rather than breeding stock. Careful, boy, Quintus warned. You're speaking treason. I'm speaking truth, Marcus said. And I'm formally invoking the right of challenge under ancient law. I challenge the bloodline purity restrictions as unjust, cruel, and contrary to our ancestors' original intent. I call for a vote to amend or abolish these laws. The chamber exploded again. This time, Praetor Felix had to bang his staff against the floor repeatedly to restore order. The right of challenge hasn't been invoked in 300 years, Felix said, his voice shaking. Do you understand what you're asking, Alpha King? If you lose this challenge, you forfeit your throne. You'll be exiled from Romulus, stripped of all titles and properties. Your heir will lose his inheritance. I understand, Marcus said clearly. And I invoke the right anyway. Quintus was livid. This is about the Omega, isn't it? The one you claim was just a surrogate. The one who bore your bastard heir. He turned to address the full council. The Alpha King doesn't care about justice or law reform. He wants to legitimize his forbidden relationship. He wants to make his tainted son the rightful heir instead of the abomination he actually is. Cassius is not an abomination. Marcus's power flooded the chamber, making the windows rattle. Several council members flinched. He is my son, Heir. And yes, his mother is the Omega you're all so determined to erase. But that doesn't make him less. It doesn't make her less. And it's long past time this council recognized that. So you admit it, Quintus said triumphantly. You admit the bond was real. That you lied 7 years ago when you claimed she was just a surrogate. Marcus felt the trap close around him. Quintus had maneuvered him into a public confession. Now everything would come out, the mate bond, the blood oath, all of it. But Marcus didn't flinch. He'd come too far to turn back now. Yes, he said clearly. I admit it. Lucia is my true mate. The bond formed 7 years ago. And I denied it. I let the council chain her. I watched them burn a blood oath into her wrists. I sent her away because I was a coward who cared more about his crown than his heart. His voice rang through the chamber. But I won't be that coward anymore. I formally claim Lucia as my mate. And I claim Cassius as my legitimate heir, born of a true bond. And I dare this council to prove that's wrong. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Quintus seemed momentarily speechless. Then, from the gallery, someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Marcus looked up to see a woman, an Omega by her scent, standing and applauding. Then another joined her. And another. Within moments, half the gallery was on their feet, applauding an Alpha King who'd finally admitted the truth. But the council chamber remained silent. 12 faces, most of them hostile, staring down at Marcus with varying degrees of shock and outrage. This changes nothing, Quintus said finally. You've confessed to violating pack law, to forcing a blood oath on an Omega to cover your crimes, to lying about your heir's parentage. Every word out of your mouth is grounds for impeachment. Perhaps, Decimus spoke up for the first time. But it's also grounds for legal reform. The Alpha King has invoked the right of challenge. Under ancient law, that requires a formal debate and vote. You cannot simply dismiss it because you don't like his motives. Praetor Felix was consulting a massive leather tome, his fingers tracing ancient text. Council is correct. The right of challenge, once invoked, must be honored. We will have 3 days of formal debate. Each side will present arguments. Witnesses may be called. And at the end of the 3rd day, the full council votes. He looked up at Marcus. But understand this, Your Majesty. If you lose, the penalties are severe. Exile is just the beginning. Your mate, if she exists, will be executed for violating the blood oath. Your son will be stripped of all inheritance and cast out. And you will be forbidden from ever setting foot in Romulus again. And if I win? Marcus asked. If you win, the laws change. Your mate is legitimized. Your son inherits. And pack tradition shifts forever. Felix's expression was unreadable. But that's a very large if, Your Majesty. Marcus met the praetor's eyes steadily. I'll take those odds. Then let the challenge period begin, Felix declared. 3 days hence we vote. May the gods guide us toward wisdom. The chamber erupted into chaos as council members began arguing amongst themselves, as gallery observers shouted questions and opinions, as the implications of what had just happened rippled through the room like shockwaves. Marcus stood at the center of it all, feeling strangely calm. He'd done it. He'd made his challenge public. There was no turning back now. Octavia appeared at his elbow. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed, she murmured. Probably both, Marcus admitted. How bad is it? In the council. 6 votes definitely against you. 3 that might be swayed. 3 unknown. She glanced around the chamber. In the gallery. You just became a folk hero to every Omega and mixed-blood wolf in the city. By nightfall, this story will have spread to every quarter of Romulus. And Julius. Octavia's expression darkened. He's already left. Probably heading straight to Quintus to regroup. She gripped Marcus's arm. You need to prepare. 3 days might sound like time, but Quintus will use every hour to build his case against you. He'll bring in witnesses. Dig up every law and precedent that supports bloodline purity. Paint you as a lovesick fool who's willing to destroy pack stability for an Omega. Let him, Marcus said. Because I'm going to spend the same 3 days proving that pack stability built on cruelty isn't worth preserving. Where are you going now? Decimus asked as Marcus moved toward the chamber doors. To the lower quarter, Marcus said. Lucia needs to know what's coming. And Cassius. He paused. Cassius needs to know the truth. All of it. Before someone else tells him first. Lucia's shop was crowded when Marcus arrived. Word had already spread, faster than he'd anticipated, about the emergency council session. About the Alpha King's public confession. About the challenge to pack law. The customers fell silent when Marcus entered, their eyes wide. An old woman actually bowed. A young mother clutched her child protectively. Everyone out, Lucia said from behind her counter. Her voice steady despite the fear Marcus could scent on her. Shops closed for the day. They left quickly, casting glances back at Marcus as they went. When the last customer had gone, Lucia locked the door and pulled the curtains. Then she turned to face him. What did you do? She asked. I claimed you, Marcus said simply. Before the full council. Before the entire gallery. I told them you're my true mate. That Cassius is legitimate. And I challenged the bloodline laws. Lucia sat down heavily on a stool, as if her legs wouldn't support her. You're insane. You said that already. It bears repeating. She pressed her hands to her face. Do you understand what you've done? You've painted a target on my back. On Cassius's back. Every purist in the city will want us dead now. They wanted you dead anyway, Marcus pointed out. At least now we're fighting back. We're going to lose, Lucia said hollowly. The council will never vote to change laws that have stood for 1,000 years. They'll strip you of your crown, execute me, and cast out Cassius. We'll all end up destroyed. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But maybe not. Have evidence. Legal precedent. Support in the gallery. Gallery support means nothing if the council votes against you. Lucia stood abruptly, pacing the small shop. You should have consulted me before you did this. Before you made choices that affect my life. Would you have agreed? Marcus asked. The question stopped her. For a long moment Lucia stood there, her back to him, shoulders shaking. No, she admitted finally. I would have told you to forget about me. To protect Cassius by keeping the lie going. To let me die quietly rather than risk everything on a gamble. She turned, and there were tears streaming down her face. But you did it anyway. You stood before the entire council and claimed me. After 7 years of denial. After everything. I told you I'd fight for us, Marcus said quietly. That I wouldn't be a coward again. You're still going to lose. Then I lose fighting for something that matters instead of dying slowly with regrets. He moved closer. But I didn't come here to debate strategy. Came because Cassius needs to know. Before the city gossip reaches the palace. Before someone else tells him that his mother is alive and his father has been lying to him for 7 years. Fresh fear crossed Lucia's face. Marcus, he's 7 years old. How do you tell a child something like that? Carefully. Honestly. Together. Marcus held out his hand. Come with me. Back to the palace. Meet your son properly. Help me explain this in a way that doesn't destroy him. I can't go to the palace. The blood oath is being broken, Marcus interrupted. Tomorrow. Priestess Valeria at the Temple of Diana has agreed to perform the ritual. It's dangerous and it will hurt, but it's the only way to free you before the oath kills you completely. Lucia stared at him. You found a way to break it. A way to try, Marcus corrected. There's no guarantee. The priestess said we could both die in the attempt. But it's a chance, Lucia. A real chance to end this curse. She looked down at her scarred wrist, at the black veins spreading from the silver marks. If it works, you'll be free. The oath will be gone. You'll be able to speak Cassius's name. Claim him as yours. Tell the full truth about what happened between us. Marcus's voice was intense. You'll be free, Lucia. Truly free. For the first time in 7 years. The longing on her face was painful to witness. But beneath it was terror. And if it doesn't work? If we both die? Then Cassius loses both his parents at once. And I'll have failed you one final time. Marcus's throat was tight. But staying silent, letting the oath keep killing you slowly while we wait for the council to decide our fate, that's guaranteed death. At least this gives us a fighting chance. Lucia closed her eyes, wrestling with a decision no one should have to make. When she opened them again, there was resignation mixed with desperate hope. All right, she whispered. I'll come to the palace. I'll meet Cassius. I'll try the ritual. She met Marcus's gaze. But if this goes wrong, if we don't survive tomorrow, promise me someone will tell Cassius that I loved him. That every day of the last 7 years I thought about him. That leaving him was the hardest thing I've ever done. I promise, Marcus said. But you're going to survive this, Lucia. We both are. And you're going to tell him yourself. He hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. They arrived at the palace after dark, using the same hidden passages Marcus had taken that morning. Lucia moved through the corridors like a ghost, her hood pulled low, her presence barely a whisper. She'd been here before 7 years ago, but everything had changed. She was no longer the healer's apprentice welcomed into the palace. Now she was a criminal, returning to the scene of her crime. Cassius is in his chambers, Marcus said as they climbed a servant's stairway. I sent word that I needed to speak with him privately. He doesn't know you're coming. What do I say to him? Lucia's voice was shaking. How do I? What if he hates me for abandoning him? He won't hate you. He doesn't even know you yet. Marcus paused on the landing, turning to face her. But he will know you, Lucia. After tonight, he'll know his mother. And whatever happens with the council, whatever happens with the ritual, he'll have that. We'll have given him that much. They reached the royal wing. Guards stood at attention outside Cassius's door but didn't question Marcus's companion. If they recognized Lucia, they were smart enough not to mention it. Marcus knocked. "Cassius. It's father. May I come in?" "Yes, father." The boy's voice was bright, innocent, about to be shattered. They entered to find Cassius sitting at his desk, surrounded by drawings. Dozens of them. All of the same woman's face, rendered over and over in charcoal and ink. Some showed her smiling. Some showed her sad. All of them showed Lucia. The boy looked up, his face, so achingly like Marcus's, breaking into a smile. Then he saw the hooded figure beside his father. The smile faded into curiosity. "Father, who is that?" Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. The moment that would change everything. He looked at Lucia and saw her frozen, tears already streaming down her face as she stared at the son she hadn't held since the day he was born. "Cassius," Marcus said gently, moving to kneel beside his son's chair. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He took a steadying breath. "You know how you've always asked about your mother? About what she was like?" The boy nodded, his young face serious now. "You said she died when I was born. That she was brave and kind and that she loved me very much." "I lied," Marcus said, the words like broken glass in his throat. "Your mother didn't die, Cassius. I sent her away. Because powerful people told me I had to choose between her and my throne. And I chose wrong." Cassius's eyes went wide. "She's alive." "Yes." Marcus gestured to Lucia. "She's here." Lucia lowered her hood with trembling hands. Cassius gasped, not in fear but in recognition. "You're the lady from the market. The one who gave me sweet bread and told me stories." "Yes," Lucia whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm her. And I'm your mother, Cassius." The boy stared at her, his young mind trying to process information too big to comprehend. "But father said you were dead." "I know, sweet boy. And I'm so sorry. Your father was trying to protect you from a very complicated situation." Lucia moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. "There are laws, bad laws, that said we couldn't be a family. That said your father couldn't keep both me and his throne. So he made a choice that hurt all of us. But he's trying to make it right now." "Why didn't you come back?" Cassius asked, and there was such raw hurt in his voice that both adults flinched. "Why did you stay away if you were alive?" "Because they made me swear an oath," Lucia said, kneeling so she was at his eye level. "A magical oath that wouldn't let me speak the truth. That wouldn't let me tell you who I was. If I tried to claim you, the magic would have killed me." She showed him her scarred wrist. "See these marks? This is from the oath. It's been hurting me for 7 years because all I wanted was to hold you and I couldn't." Cassius reached out tentatively and touched the scars. His small fingers were gentle, reverent. "It must have hurt very much." "It did," Lucia admitted. "But not as much as being away from you hurt." "When I met you at the fountain," Cassius said slowly, "I felt something warm. Like I knew you somehow, even though we'd never met before." His eyes, Marcus's eyes but softer, kinder, looked up at her. "Was that the bond? The mother-son bond?" "I think so, yes," Lucia said, fresh tears falling. "I think part of you always knew who I was, even when I couldn't tell you." The boy was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "Are you staying now? Are you coming back to live with us?" Marcus and Lucia exchanged glances. How did they explain the next 3 days to a 7-year-old? How did they make him understand that everything hung in the balance? "We're trying to make that happen," Marcus said carefully. "But there are still obstacles. The same laws that made me send your mother away. I'm fighting to change them. In 2 days the council will vote. And if we win that vote, then yes, your mother will stay. We'll be a family. And if you lose?" Cassius asked, too perceptive for his age. "Then Marcus struggled for words. Then things will be difficult. But whatever happens, Cassius, I want you to know something. Your mother loves you. She has always loved you. Every day of your life, she's been in this city, watching over you from a distance, loving you with everything she has. And I'm sorry, so sorry that I kept that from you. Cassius looked between his parents, his young face struggling with emotions too complex for his years. Then suddenly, he threw his arms around Lucia's neck and buried his face in her shoulder. I'm glad you're not dead, he said, his voice muffled. I missed you even though I never met you. Lucia's composure shattered completely. She wrapped her arms around her son finally after 7 years, and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Marcus felt his own eyes burning, watching the reunion he'd stolen from them, finally happening. They stayed like that for a long time. Mother and son, holding each other as if they could make up for 7 years of separation in a single embrace. And maybe they could. Maybe love was powerful enough to bridge any gap, heal any wound, survive any separation. Marcus could only hope it was powerful enough to survive what came next. The Temple of Diana was dark when they arrived the following evening. Lucia walked between Marcus and Decimus, her hood up, her courage held together by pure will. Behind them, Octavia and Livia followed, serving as witnesses. Cassius had been left at the palace with trusted guards. No child should see what was about to happen. Priestess Valeria waited at the altar, the massive statue of Diana looming behind her. Candles burned in a wide circle, and in the center was a basin filled with silver water that reflected the firelight like liquid mercury. You came, Valeria said. Both of you. That's brave. Or foolish, Lucia said quietly. Often the same thing. The priestess gestured to the circle. Come. We don't have much time. The blood oath is accelerating, I can see it from here. Another week, and it would have reached your heart. Lucia paled but stepped forward. Marcus followed, his jaw set with determination. The ritual is simple in concept but excruciating in execution, Valeria explained as they entered the circle. Blood oaths are sealed with pain and bound with silver. To break one, we must reverse the process. The silver must be extracted from the scars. The pain must be replaced with willing sacrifice. And the bond between you must prove stronger than the magic trying to destroy it. What do we need to do? Marcus asked. You'll both place your hands in the silver water. The priestess poured some kind of powder into the basin, and it began to glow with an otherworldly light. The silver will recognize the oath scars and try to complete what it started, to burn through to your hearts and kill you both. Your task is to hold on to each other, to let your bond, your love, create a shield against the silver's hunger. And if our bond isn't strong enough, Lucia whispered, then the silver wins. And you both die. Valeria's expression was grave. I won't lie to you. The mortality rate for this ritual is high. Most couples who attempt it have bonds too damaged by betrayal to withstand the silver. But you asked for this knowing the risks. So I'll ask you one final time. Are you certain you want to proceed? Marcus looked at Lucia. 7 years of pain and regret and impossible longing hung between them. But beneath it all, the mate bond still pulsed. Wounded, yes, but alive. Still fighting. Still reaching for each other across the distance he'd created. I'm certain, he said. Lucia hesitated longer. Then she looked down at her scarred wrist, at the black veins spreading toward her heart. I'm certain, she said. Then we begin. Valeria began chanting in an ancient language, her voice rising and falling in rhythms that predated modern pack law by millennia. The candles flickered in response. The silver water began to churn. Place your hands in the basin, Valeria commanded. And do not let go of each other, no matter how much it hurts. Marcus and Lucia knelt on opposite sides of the basin. They reached for each other across the glowing water, their hands meeting in the center. The moment their fingers touched the silver liquid, pain exploded through them both. Lucia screamed. Marcus roared. The silver was alive, sentient, hungry. It recognized the oath scars on Lucia's wrists and immediately began spreading up her arms, burning through her skin like acid. And because Marcus had voluntarily joined the ritual, the silver attacked him too, searching for equivalent scars, finding none, and deciding to create them. Silver wrapped around Marcus's wrists like molten chains. He felt them burning into his skin, felt the ancient magic trying to bind him the way it had bound Lucia. The pain was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Not just physical but spiritual. The silver was trying to sever the mate bond itself, to cut the connection between them and let them die separately. Hold on. Valeria's voice cut through the agony. Let the bond guide you. Remember why you're doing this. Marcus forced his eyes open, forced himself to look across the basin at Lucia. She was pale as death, her body convulsing with pain, but her hands were still gripped around his, still holding on. Lucia, he gasped. I'm sorry. For everything. For every moment of these 7 years. For not fighting sooner. For not being brave enough. Stop apologizing, she gritted out through clenched teeth. And start fighting. Our son needs us both. Ishes. The thought of his small face, his innocent questions, his desperate hope that his family could be whole, it cut through the pain like a blade. Marcus squeezed Lucia's hands tighter, pouring everything he had into the mate bond. Love, regret, hope, determination. The silver reacted, writhing like a living thing. It didn't want to let go. It had been feeding on Lucia's pain for 7 years, and it was not going to release its hold easily. But the bond was stronger. Marcus felt it the moment the shift happened, the exact instant when their combined will became more powerful than the ancient magic trying to destroy them. The mate bond, dormant but never dead, surged to life with a force that made the temple's foundations shake. Golden light exploded from their joined hands, pushing back against the silver. Valeria's chanting grew louder, more insistent. Yes, the bond recognizes itself. Hold on, just a little longer. The silver fought back viciously. It tightened around their wrists, trying one final desperate attempt to strangle the life from them both. Marcus felt his heart stuttering, felt darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. Across from him, Lucia's eyes were rolling back, her grip starting to weaken. No! Marcus shouted. Lucia, stay with me. Think about Cassius. Think about holding him this morning. Think about the family we're going to have. Her eyes focused again. Just barely. And in them, Marcus saw not just pain, but fierce determination. The same determination that had kept her alive and in Romulus for 7 years when she could have fled. The same determination that had let her watch their son from a distance and never once tried to steal him away. I love you, Marcus said, the words torn from somewhere deep and true. I never stopped. Even when I sent you away. Even when I was too much of a coward to admit it. I love you, Lucia. Choose you. I choose us. The golden light blazed brighter. And suddenly, impossibly, the silver began to retreat. It pulled back from their wrists, dissolving into the basin water. The black veins on Lucia's arms receded, fading from her skin as if they'd never existed. The burning sensation faded to warmth, then to nothing. And the scars, the terrible silver scars that had marked Lucia's wrists for 7 years, began to heal, not disappear. They would always carry marks from what had been done to them. But the scars were just scars now, raised skin and memory, not active magic trying to kill her. The blood oath was broken. Lucia collapsed forward, and Marcus caught her across the basin, pulling her into his arms. They were both shaking, both barely conscious, but alive. Alive and free. It's done, Valeria said, and there was satisfaction in her voice. The oath is broken. The silver has released you both. Diana has witnessed and approved. From the edges of the circle, Octavia and Livia rushed forward to help. They pulled Marcus and Lucia out of the ritual space, wrapping them in blankets, checking them for lasting damage. Are they all right? Tavia demanded. They'll live, Valeria confirmed. The bond was strong enough. Barely. Another minute and they would have been lost. She looked down at the two of them, huddled together on the temple floor. You should be proud. Not many couples survive what you just endured. Marcus was too exhausted to feel proud. But he felt Lucia breathing against his chest, felt her heart beating in time with his, and he felt grateful. So deeply grateful that tears leaked from his eyes. It's over, Lucia whispered against him. The oath is really over. It's over, Marcus confirmed. You're free. We're free. They sat there for a long time, holding each other while their bodies recovered from the ordeal. Around them, the candles burned down to nothing. The silver water in the basin turned clear and still. And high above, through the temple's open roof, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow they would return to the palace. Tomorrow the council debate would begin in earnest. Tomorrow they would have to face Quintus and Julius and all the forces aligned against them. But tonight, for just a few hours, Marcus and Lucia had won a victory. They had broken an oath that should have been unbreakable. They had proven their bond was stronger than ancient magic. Now they just had to prove it was stronger than ancient law. The council debates began at dawn on the second day. The grand chamber was even more crowded than before. Word of the Alpha King's challenge had spread throughout the realm, and representatives from every major pack had arrived to witness history being made or destroyed. Marcus stood on the central platform again, but this time he wasn't alone. Lucia stood beside him, her healed wrists visible to everyone. Her presence a living declaration of defiance against pack tradition. The gallery exploded with reactions when she appeared. Gasps, whispers, some cheers from the Omegas present, some hisses from the purists. Quintus looked murderous. This is outrageous. You've brought the Omega into these chambers. She's under blood oath. The oath is broken, Marcus announced clearly. Last night, under the guidance of Priestess Valeria, we completed the ritual of severance. Lucia is free to speak. Free to claim her son. Free to tell her truth. Impossible, Senator Titus sputtered. Blood oaths cannot be broken. They can, came Valeria's voice from the gallery. The priestess rose, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. I performed the ritual myself. Witnessed by respected members of the royal family. The oath is dissolved. The goddess Diana has released her claim. What was bound is now free. The chamber erupted again. Even some of the council members who'd been firmly in Quintus's camp looked shaken. Breaking a blood oath was supposed to be impossible, yet here stood living proof that it could be done. Then let her speak, Praetor Felix said, his ancient voice cutting through the chaos. If Lucia is truly free of the oath, let her tell us her story. Let the council hear directly from the Omega at the center of this controversy. Marcus looked at Lucia. She was pale but steady. She nodded. 7 years ago, Lucia began, her voice soft but clear. I came to this palace as a healer's apprentice. I had no ambitions beyond helping people. I had no knowledge of pack politics or bloodline laws. I was just a young Omega trying to make a difference. She paused, gathering strength. And then I met Marcus. And the moment our eyes met, I felt the bond snap into place. A true mate bond, the kind you read about in old stories. The kind that's supposed to be a blessing. Her voice grew harder. But this council turned it into a curse. They told Marcus he had to choose between his throne and his mate. They told him that my blood, tainted by human ancestry 3 generations back, made me unworthy. That any child we had would be an abomination. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with council members. So Marcus made the choice they demanded. He denied our bond. And when I got pregnant with his child, when there was proof that we'd been together, this council forced me to swear a blood oath. She held up her wrists, showing the faded scars. They wrapped silver chains around me and burned magic into my skin. Magic that would kill me if I ever spoke the truth. If I ever tried to claim my son. If I ever said aloud that Marcus Aurelius was my true mate. Her voice broke slightly. And then they cast me out of the palace with nothing. No money, no home, no child. Just scars and pain and a curse that's been killing me slowly for 7 years. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even Quintus seemed at a loss for words. I stayed in Romulus, Lucia continued. I lived in the lower quarter, barely surviving, because I couldn't bear to leave the city where my son was growing up. I watched him from a distance, prayed for him every day at the temple. And I waited, hoping that someday, somehow, things would change. She looked at Marcus. I never imagined he would risk his throne to make it happen. But he has. And now I'm asking this council, what kind of laws are we upholding? Laws that rip apart true mates. Laws that punish omegas for the circumstances of their birth. Laws that turn love into a crime punishable by death. The laws exist to protect bloodline purity, Senator Titus argued, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. To ensure the strength of our pack. Strength? Lucia cut him off. What strength comes from forcing alphas to abandon their true mates? What strength comes from children growing up without mothers? What strength comes from blood oaths and silver chains and magic that kills? She shook her head. That's not strength. That's fear. You're afraid that allowing mixed bloodlines will weaken the pack. But I think the real weakness is being too afraid to change. Too afraid to admit that maybe, just maybe, your ancestors got it wrong. The purge happened for a reason, Quintus interjected, finding his voice again. Mixed bloodlines brought chaos, disease, weakness. Our ancestors recognized the threat and acted to protect future generations. The purge was genocide, Livia said, rising from her seat in the gallery for the second time. Don't prettify it with talk of protection and strength. It was frightened men killing innocents because they were different. And then codifying that fear into law so no one could question them. She held up her journal. I have the historical records right here. During those 50 years before the purge, there was no epidemic of weakness. No collapse of pack structure. Just families living and loving without being told their bonds were invalid. Ancient history is irrelevant, Quintus snapped. We live under current law. Which can be changed, Marcus interrupted. That's the entire point of this challenge. Laws created by mortals can be amended by mortals. Nothing is written in stone except the stone we choose not to break. Praetor Felix held up his hand for silence. Enough. We've heard opening statements from both sides. Now we move to formal debate. Each side will have the opportunity to call witnesses, present evidence, and make legal arguments. At the end of 3 days, the council votes. He looked at Marcus and Quintus in turn. This is not a spectacle. This is a legal proceeding that will determine the future of pack law. I expect everyone to treat it with appropriate gravity. What followed were 3 of the longest days of Marcus's life. Quintus brought forth witness after witness. Historians who argued that the pre-purge era was unstable. Healers who claimed mixed bloodlines resulted in genetic weakness. Pack leaders who insisted that changing the laws would lead to chaos. He presented ancient texts that supported bloodline purity, invoked the names of revered ancestors who'd instituted the restrictions, and painted Marcus as a lovesick fool willing to destroy pack tradition for personal gratification. But Marcus and his team fought back. Decimus presented the historical documents Livia had preserved, proving that mixed blood unions had once been accepted and even celebrated. Octavia brought forward omegas and mixed blood wolves who testified about the cruelty of current laws. Families torn apart, mates forbidden from bonding, children denied their parents. And Valeria herself testified about the blood oath ritual, describing in graphic detail the suffering such oaths caused and questioning whether any law requiring such torture could be considered just. The debate raged through the chambers and spilled out into the city. Every tavern, every market square, every gathering place in Romulus became a forum for argument. Public opinion shifted hour by hour. The traditionalists held firm, but growing numbers of citizens, especially omegas and younger wolves, began speaking out in favor of change. By the 3rd day, the tension was unbearable. The council chamber was so packed that people stood in the aisles, pressed against walls, desperate to witness the conclusion. Marcus had barely slept in 72 hours. Lucia looked equally exhausted, her hand constantly finding his for support. But they'd made it. They'd presented their case. Now it all came down to the vote. Before we proceed to the final vote, Praetor Felix said, his voice heavy with the weight of history, I'm going to do something unprecedented. I'm going to allow the heir to speak. Every head turned toward the gallery, where Cassius sat between two guards. The boy stood, his young face serious, and walked down to the central platform. He looked so small there, surrounded by towering adults and ancient law, but he walked with his father's confidence. Honored council members, Cassius said, his voice clear despite his age. I know I'm just a child. I know I don't understand all of politics and history, but I understand family. And I understand love. He looked at his parents. My father told me my whole life that my mother died. And I believed him because why wouldn't I? But now I know she didn't die. She was taken from me by laws that said we couldn't be together. Laws that said she wasn't good enough to be my mother because of blood she didn't choose. He turned to face the council. I've met my mother now. I've talked to her. And you know what I learned? She's kind. She's brave. She loves me so much that she lived in pain for 7 years just to stay close to me. And you're telling me that's not good enough? That laws written by people who died hundreds of years ago matter more than the fact that she's my mother and I love her? Several council members looked uncomfortable. Even Quintus seemed affected by the boy's words. If you vote against my parents, Cassius continued, you're not just upholding tradition. You're telling me that I have to lose my mother again. That the laws matter more than my family. That I should grow up without her because some people are afraid of change. His voice wavered but held. Please don't do that. Please don't take her away from me again. Please be brave enough to choose love over fear. The boy walked back to his seat in silence so profound that every breath was audible. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks. Beside him, Lucia was openly weeping. Praetor Felix cleared his throat roughly. Thank you, young Cassius. That was very moving. He turned to the council. Now, we vote. The question before us is simple. Should pact law be amended to remove bloodline purity restrictions and allow true mate bonds regardless of ancestry? He paused. All in favor, raise your hands. Time seemed to stop. Marcus gripped Lucia's hand so tightly he must have been hurting her, but she didn't pull away. They watched as council members' hands began to rise. 1, 2, 3, 4 votes in favor. Then a fifth hand went up. Senator Drusilla, who'd been wavering throughout the debates. And a sixth, Senator Gaius, who had a mixed-blood grandson he'd been forced to disown under current law. 6 votes. They needed 7 to win. Praetor Felix's hand rose slowly. His ancient face grave but resolute. 7 in favor. Marcus's heart hammered. 7 was exactly half the council. They needed 1 more. Just 1 more vote to change everything. The chamber held its breath. And then, impossibly, Julius stood up from the gallery. Marcus's brother, who'd been plotting with Quintus, who'd been positioning himself to take the throne. He walked down to the council floor. Praetor, Julius said quietly, I'd like to invoke my right as crown prince to cast a deciding vote in matters of succession law. It was an obscure provision, rarely used, but legal. If the heir apparent chose to vote on matters that directly affected royal inheritance, he could break a tie. Marcus stared at his brother, unable to read his expression. Was this another betrayal? Was Julius about to destroy them at the last possible moment? I vote in favor of the amendment, Julius said clearly. Let pact law be changed. Let true mates bond regardless of bloodline. Let my nephew keep his inheritance and his mother. He met Marcus's eyes across the chamber. I may not agree with all your choices, brother. But I won't be responsible for destroying your family. Our family. The chamber exploded. Cheering and shouting and chaos erupted from every direction. Marcus stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. They'd won. Against all odds, against 1,000 years of tradition, against every force that had tried to tear them apart, they'd won. Lucia collapsed against him, sobbing. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if he'd never let go again. Around them, the world was transforming. Pack law was changing. Their family was protected. Their son would inherit. They'd survived. "It's over," Marcus whispered into Lucia's hair. "It's finally over." But even as he said it, even as joy flooded through him, he saw Quintus's face in the council seats. The senator was staring at them with such pure hatred that Marcus felt cold despite the victory. This wasn't over. Not really. Quintus would find another way to strike. Another angle to exploit. Another weakness to target. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Marcus allowed himself to hold his mate, to watch his son running toward them with tears of joy on his face, to believe, for just a moment, that love really could conquer anything. Even if the price of that love was eternal vigilance against those who would destroy it. The war was won. But the battle, Marcus knew, was just beginning. Victory achieved but shadowed by Quintus's hatred and the promise of future threats. The family is together, the laws have changed, but the